My name is Leela Johnson, and I just turned 68 last month. Family has always been my everything since losing my husband decades ago. I dedicated my life to raising my son James, and later supporting him and his wife Audrey however I could. The annual Thanksgiving dinner at their beautiful home was usually tense, but I kept smiling through Audrey's little digs. This year was different though. When she publicly shushed me at the table, something inside me finally broke. Before I tell you what happened that night, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself when no one expected you to. Life has a way of taking unexpected turns. Mine certainly did when my husband Robert died of a heart attack at 42, leaving me alone with our 8-year-old son James. The grief was unbearable, but I had no choice but to keep moving forward. As a third-grade teacher in our Michigan suburb, my salary was modest, but I was determined to give James everything he needed. Our little 2-bedroom ranch house became our sanctuary. I learned to be thrifty out of necessity. Weekends were spent clipping coupons, shopping sales, and finding creative ways to stretch every dollar. James never had the fanciest clothes or the newest toys, but he never went without. I made sure of that. Despite the financial constraints, I managed to save a little each month in what I called my just-in-case fund, $20 here, $50 there. It wasn't much, but it gave me peace of mind, knowing we had something to fall back on if emergencies arose. James watched me manage our finances, and I hoped he was learning valuable lessons about living within your means. My life changed dramatically 12 years ago when my Aunt Patricia passed away. We had always been close, but I had no idea she had amassed such wealth through smart investments and her late husband's insurance policy. To my absolute shock, she left me her entire estate valued at just over $2 million. Suddenly, at 56, I found myself financially secure for the first time in my life. My first instinct was to help James. By then, he had graduated from State University with an architecture degree and was starting his career at a respected firm in Detroit. He had student loans like most young people his age, and I wanted to ease that burden. But I decided to wait to see if he could establish himself independently first. I wanted him to develop his own financial discipline. It was around this time that James met Audrey during a charity event hosted by his firm. She was working in marketing for a luxury goods company, and according to James, they connected instantly. When he brought her home to meet me for the first time, I was immediately struck by her beauty and charm. She had this way of making everyone feel special, asking thoughtful questions about my teaching career, and complimenting my modest home so sincerely. "Your home has such character, Layla," she said, running her hand along my worn but well-loved sofa. "You can feel the love in these walls." I was touched. After years of worrying about James finding happiness, seeing him with someone who seemed so kind and genuine filled me with hope. We spent that whole afternoon talking and laughing, and when they left, I hugged Audrey extra tight. "Thank you for making my son so happy," I whispered. "He makes me happy too," she replied, and I believed her. Over the next few months, I watched their relationship bloom. James was happier than I'd seen him since before his father died. They visited regularly, and each time Audrey arrived with small gifts for me, homemade cookies, fresh flowers or books she thought I'd enjoy. She asked for family recipes and seemed genuinely interested in our traditions and stories. Looking back, I should have noticed the first red flags. They were subtle, easily dismissed as isolated incidents or misunderstandings on my part. Like the time I mentioned that James loved my homemade lasagna as a child. "Oh, I make it differently now," Audrey said with a slight eye roll. "I use imported ingredients. James says he can't go back to the basic version." Or when she examined my wedding photos and remarked, "So simple back then. Right weddings are such productions now. We'll probably need at least 50,000 for ours to be presentable." When James proposed 6 months later, Audrey's engagement ring was enormous, far beyond what I knew James could afford on his junior architect's salary. When I gently asked him about it, he became defensive. "I want to give her the best, Mom. She deserves it." Their wedding planning quickly spiraled into something I barely recognized. What started as talks of a meaningful ceremony with close family and friends evolved into an extravagant affair with 200 guests at an exclusive country club. The budget Audrey outlined casually over dinner one night made my heart sink. "It's going to be around 100,000, she said, scrolling through photos on her phone. "The venue alone is 35, but worth every penny." I saw the panic in James's eyes, though he tried to hide it. Later that night, when Audrey was in the bathroom, he confessed they were struggling to cover the costs. "Mom, I hate to ask, but with your inheritance, could you help us? Just a loan until I get my next promotion." I couldn't say no to my only child. I wrote a check for $70,000 the next day, telling myself it was an investment in their happiness. James promised to pay me back eventually, but we both knew that was unlikely. The wedding was undeniably beautiful. Audrey looked stunning in her designer gown, and James beamed with pride. I sat in the front row, my teacher's pension watch on my wrist, and my department store dress, carefully steamed, feeling both out of place and immensely proud. During the reception, I overheard Audrey talking to her bridesmaids. "We paid for everything ourselves," she said. "James and I wanted it to be our gift to each other. No parental handouts for us." I said nothing. What was the point? If pretending they had funded their own wedding made her happy, who was I to contradict James? Looked happier than he had in years, and that was all that mattered to me. I told myself that the money concerns and little white lies would settle down once they were married and real life began. But as I would soon discover, this was just the beginning of a pattern that would define our relationship for years to come. After the wedding glow faded, reality quickly set in for the newlyweds. James and Audrey had both accumulated substantial student loans, his from architecture school and hers from her marketing degree and MBA. Combined with the wedding expenses they had put on credit cards despite my contribution, they were starting their marriage with nearly $200,000 in debt. They rented a beautiful apartment in one of Detroit's trendiest neighborhoods, far more expensive than what they could realistically afford. When I visited for the first time, I was struck by the high-end furniture and decor that filled every room. "Audrey has an eye for design," James explained proudly as he showed me around. "She says it's important to create the right environment." I nodded, wondering silently how they were managing the cost. Later that evening over dinner, Audrey mentioned they were thinking about buying a house. "Renting is just throwing money away," she said confidently. "And with home prices in the neighborhoods we're considering, we need to act fast before we're priced out completely." James shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We're still figuring out the down payment situation. 20% in this area is substantial." I recognized the familiar look in my son's eyes, that mixture of hope and anxiety that told me he was about to ask for help. Sure enough, after Audrey excused herself to make coffee, James turned to me. "Mom, I hate to ask this. We're trying to be independent, but with our student loans and everything, saving for a down payment is impossible right now. If we could just get our foot in the door with a house, we'd be set. Property in this area appreciates so quickly." My practical side wanted to suggest they look in more affordable neighborhoods, or wait until they had saved more. But the look on my son's face melted my resolve. "How much would you need?" I asked. "The houses we're looking at are around 600,000, so about 120,000 for the down payment." I nearly choked on my water. That was more than I had paid for my entire house, but I reminded myself that times had changed, and this was a different city, a different market. "I can help," I said finally. "But this needs to be a one-time thing, James. You and Audrey need to live within your means going forward." "Absolutely, Mom. This is just to get us started. Once we have the house, we'll be fine." I transferred the money the following week. 3 months later, they closed on a 4-bedroom colonial in Bloomfield Hills, one of the most exclusive suburbs of Detroit. The final price was $750,000, considerably more than they had initially discussed. At the housewarming party, Audrey led tours for their friends and her co-workers, detailing the renovations they planned for the already beautiful home. "We got so lucky with the timing of the market," she told everyone. "James's bonus came through just when interest rates dropped." James had received no such bonus. I kept quiet, sipping my wine in the corner of their expansive kitchen. This was becoming a pattern. My financial contributions erased from their narrative, replaced with stories of their own financial savvy and success. I had hoped the house would be the end of my financial support, but it was just the beginning. 6 months after moving in, James called in a panic. Their mortgage payment had adjusted unexpectedly, and they couldn't cover it along with their student loan payments. "It's just temporary, Mom. Audrey is up for a big promotion, and I'm being considered for a senior position. Once either of those comes through, we'll be solid." I began sending them $2,000 monthly to help with the mortgage. What was meant to be temporary assistance became a regular arrangement. Every few months, James would assure me it would end soon, but there was always a reason why they still needed help. Property taxes were higher than expected, the roof needed repairs. Audrey's promotion was delayed. Meanwhile, Audrey's lifestyle showed no signs of financial strain. She drove a new luxury SUV, replacing her previous model that was barely 3 years old. "How do you like Audrey's new car?" James asked, during one of my visits, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It's very nice," I replied carefully. "Was there something wrong with her other one?" "Oh, the lease was up and she got such a great deal on this one. Plus, she deserves it with how hard she works." I later discovered that I had unknowingly funded that car too. James had used part of my mortgage assistance to cover the substantial down payment on Audrey's new $65,000 vehicle. Their social media told a story of success and prosperity. Audrey regularly posted photos of weekend getaways to Chicago, New York City, and Miami. There were elegant restaurant meals, front-row concert tickets, and designer shopping bags. Each post was carefully crafted to showcase their enviable lifestyle. "Creating memories is our priority." Audrey captioned one photo of them toasting champagne on a sunset cruise. All while I continued to live in my modest home, driving my 10-year-old sedan and carefully monitoring my retirement accounts to ensure I could continue supporting them without jeopardizing my own future. James visited me less and less frequently. When I suggested coming to their house instead, there was always some reason why it wasn't convenient. Renovations in progress. Audrey hosting a work event, plans with friends. Our once close relationship was becoming increasingly distant, maintained primarily through phone calls that felt more obligatory than genuine. "Sorry I haven't been around much," Mom, James would say. "Things are just so busy with work and the house." I swallowed my hurt and told him I understood. What else could I do? I feared that pushing too hard would only drive him further away. So I continued writing checks and making transfers, telling myself it was an expression of love rather than enabling behavior. But late at night alone in my quiet house, I wondered if I was helping or hurting my son by making his artificially inflated lifestyle possible. The painful truth was that James and Audrey had become accustomed to a standard of living they hadn't earned and couldn't maintain without my silent subsidy. And somewhere along the way, my generosity had transformed from appreciated assistance to expected entitlement. 3 years into their marriage, during one of our increasingly rare dinner visits, James and Audrey shared that they were trying to start a family. I was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandmother and told them so, hugging them both tightly. "That's wonderful news," I said, already imagining tiny feet pattering through their spacious home. "Have you been trying long?" A shadow crossed Audrey's face. "About a year now," she admitted. "No luck yet." Over the following months, I received periodic updates on their fertility journey. First came the tracking apps and scheduled intimacy. Then specialized vitamins and dietary changes. Acupuncture sessions and fertility yoga classes followed. Each new approach was undertaken with determination and optimism. But as another year passed without conception, their hope began to waver. During a rare mother-son lunch without Audrey present, James confided that they had been seeing fertility specialists. The doctors ran a bunch of tests, he explained, pushing food around his plate. They found some issues on both sides. "Audrey has endometriosis, and my sperm motility isn't great." My heart ached for them. The pain of wanting a child and facing biological barriers was something I couldn't fully comprehend, having conceived James easily in my youth. "What options have the doctors suggested?" I asked gently. "IVF is our best shot," James replied. "But Mom, it's expensive. Really expensive. Especially since we might need multiple rounds." I knew where the conversation was heading. By now, I was still sending them regular mortgage assistance, though I suspected the money was being used for far more than just housing costs. Their lifestyle had not diminished despite the financial pressures they claimed to be under. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. James looked down at his hands. "Each cycle is about $20,000. Insurance covers almost nothing, and the success rate for first attempts isn't great, so we might need 3 or 4 tries." "That's a lot of money," I said carefully. "I know, Mom. I wouldn't ask if there was any other way. This is our future family we're talking about. Your grandchildren?" He knew exactly which heartstring to pull. Despite my reservations about their financial management, the thought of helping bring my grandchildren into the world was irresistible. "I'll help," I said. "Of course I'll help." What followed was an emotional roller coaster that spanned 18 months. The first IVF cycle ended in bitter disappointment when no viable embryos were produced. Audrey was devastated, and I transferred an additional $10,000 to cover the medications for their second attempt. The second cycle yielded 2 embryos, but neither implantation was successful. I watched from the periphery as Audrey's Instagram presence shifted from glamorous outings to subtle hints about their journey, carefully curated posts about strength and perseverance, without explicitly mentioning fertility. Treatments. "Everything happens for a reason," she captioned one sunset photo. "Some paths to dreams are longer than others." What her followers didn't see was the financial reality behind those inspirational quotes. By the start of their third IVF cycle, I had contributed over $50,000 to their fertility treatments, in addition to my ongoing monthly support. The third cycle brought the miracle they had been waiting for. 2 embryos were successfully implanted, and both survived. Audrey was pregnant with twins. When James called with the news, I burst into tears of joy. "Twins. Oh my goodness, James. I'm going to be a grandmother twice over." The pregnancy was difficult. Audrey experienced severe morning sickness that lasted well into her second trimester. She was put on partial bed rest at 24 weeks due to concerns about preterm labor. Through it all, I offered to come stay with them to help, but my offers were politely declined. "Audrey's mother is coming for a few weeks," James explained. "And we've hired a part-time housekeeper to help with the cleaning and meal prep." I later discovered that I was unknowingly paying for that housekeeper through my support funds. Despite the challenges, Audrey managed to document her pregnancy journey extensively on social media. Professional maternity photo shoots, a lavish baby shower with custom everything, and a completely renovated nursery that looked like it belonged in a design magazine. Creating the perfect welcome for our miracle babies, she posted showcasing the twin nursery with its hand-painted murals and custom-made cribs. One post in particular caught my attention and stung more than I expected. "So grateful for this journey," Audrey wrote beneath a glowing photo of herself cradling her belly. "We sacrificed so much and worked so hard to make these babies possible. Every penny we saved, every vacation we skipped, every late night we worked, was worth it for this moment. We made this happen through sheer determination and love." Not a single mention of the financial support that had made their IVF possible. Not even a private thank you text to acknowledge my contribution to their miracle. It was as if my role had been completely erased from their story. Emma and Ethan were born 7 weeks premature, but healthy. They spent 2 weeks in the NICU before coming home. I wasn't invited to the hospital during their stay with James, citing COVID restrictions and Audrey's need for privacy. My first meeting with my grandchildren came when they were nearly a month old. Holding those tiny babies in my arms was one of the most profound moments of my life since becoming a mother myself. They were perfect, Emma, with James's blue eyes, and Ethan with a dimple, just like his father's. I fell in love instantly and completely. "They're absolutely beautiful," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Thank you for letting me be part of their lives." Audrey, recovering on the couch, smiled thinly. "We'll need to be careful about visits while their immune systems develop." The pediatrician suggested limiting exposure to people outside our household for the first few months. I understood the medical concerns, but as the weeks passed, it became clear that limiting exposure meant severely restricting my access to my grandchildren. My requests to visit were frequently met with reasons why it wasn't a good time. The babies were napping. They had just seen the doctor. Audrey was too exhausted for company. Meanwhile, Audrey's parents visited regularly, staying for days at a time. Photos appeared online of other friends holding the twins. It seemed everyone but me was welcome in their home. When I was allowed to visit, Audrey hovered nervously, correcting my baby-holding technique and questioning whether I had gotten my flu shot and Tdap vaccine, despite my repeated assurances that I had. "I just don't know if you should be feeding her that way," she would say, whisking Emma from my arms. The lactation consultant showed us a specific position. The message was clear: I was not trusted with my own grandchildren. The woman whose financial support had made their very existence possible was being treated like an incompetent intruder. The irony wasn't lost on me when Audrey began positioning herself online as some kind of parenting expert. Her social media transformed into a carefully curated display of motherhood wisdom. "Becoming a mother has been the most profound journey of self-discovery," she wrote. "I've learned that the sacrifices we make for our children are what define us as parents." Those words echoed in my mind. As I drove home from yet another abbreviated visit, my offered babysitting help declined again. My suggested outing with the twins dismissed as too soon. The twins were now the center of a narrative that continued to exclude my contributions while emphasizing Audrey and James's sacrifices and hard work. What hurt most wasn't the money. It was the erasure of my role in their lives, both financial and emotional. As Emma and Ethan approached their first birthday, the pattern of limited access to my grandchildren became firmly established. My visits were restricted to once every 2 or 3 weeks, always at their house, always on Audrey's schedule, and rarely lasting more than an hour or two. "The twins are on such a strict routine," Audrey would explain when cutting visits short. "If we disrupt their schedule, they won't sleep well for days." I began to notice that these scheduling conflicts mysteriously disappeared when Audrey's parents wanted to visit. Her mother Linda frequently stayed for entire weekends, posting photos of pancake breakfasts with the twins and trips to the park. During one visit, I brought up the possibility of taking the twins to the Children's Museum that had just opened nearby. "I'd love to treat them to a membership," I offered. "We could go together next weekend, or I could take them for a few hours if you and James want some time alone." Audrey's expression tightened. "They're really too young for museums, Layla. All those germs and overstimulation. Maybe when they're older." The next day, Audrey posted photos of the twins at the very same museum with her friend Tiffany and Tiffany's children. The caption read, "Introducing culture and learning early. Never too young for educational experiences." When I called James to express my hurt, he was defensive. "Mom, Audrey is just protective. She's a fantastic mother. And Tiffany's kids are the same age as the twins, so it's different." "But James, I've barely spent any time with them. They hardly know me." "That's not true," he insisted, though we both knew it was. "Look, raising twins is incredibly stressful. Audrey is doing her best. Just give her space." Space seemed to be the one thing Audrey had plenty of. Despite claiming exhaustion from parenting, her social media showcased an active life. Girls' nights out, couples' weekends with friends, fitness classes 3 times a week. Somehow the strict routine that prevented grandma visits didn't interfere with these activities. During the twins' first birthday party, I arrived early to help set up, bringing gifts I had carefully selected. Classic books I used to read to James, handmade sweaters I had knitted over the past months, and savings bonds for the feeds. Their future education. The lavish celebration was Instagram ready, with professional decorations, a custom cake, and even a hired photographer. I estimated the cost at several $1,000s, money that would have been better spent on their mounting debt, which I was still helping to subsidize. As guests arrived, I noticed something odd. Audrey introduced her parents as Grammy and Pops to everyone, while I was simply James's mom, or occasionally Leela. No grandmother title for me. When I asked James about it privately, he looked uncomfortable. "Audrey thinks having too many grandparent names would confuse the twins," he explained. "Her parents got first pick since they're around more often." The message couldn't have been clearer. I was a secondary figure in my grandchildren's lives, despite financially supporting the family that housed and raised them. During the party, I overheard Audrey talking to her friend about their recent decision to enroll the twins in an exclusive preschool program for 2 mornings a week. It's ridiculously expensive, Audrey admitted, but so worth it for their development. We've cut back on other things to make it happen. I knew for a fact they hadn't cut back on anything. My monthly support had actually increased in the past year to cover what James described as unexpected medical bills for the twins. That evening, after most guests had left, Audrey's mother, Linda, cornered me in the kitchen. "The twins are just thriving," she said, wine glass in hand. "Audrey and James are doing an amazing job, especially considering how tight things are financially. They never complain, but I know they've been struggling to make ends meet with all these childcare costs." I nearly dropped the plate I was washing. Were they telling her family they were struggling financially while taking my money? The hypocrisy was stunning. As the twins grew, so did the list of parenting decisions I wasn't allowed to question. When I suggested that perhaps 2-year-old Ethan might be ready to try using the potty, Audrey shot me a withering look. "We're following child-led potty training," she informed me. "Pushing them before they're ready can cause psychological harm. I've done extensive research on this." When I mentioned that James had been fully potty trained before he turned 2, she smiled tightly. "Parenting knowledge has evolved significantly since then, Layla. We have so much more information now about child development." The implied criticism of my parenting was obvious. According to Audrey, I had done everything wrong with James, despite raising a kind, successful man entirely on my own. The pattern continued with everything from nutrition to discipline. Any suggestion I made was dismissed as outdated or uninformed. Any story about how I had raised James was met with a condescending smile and some version of "we know better now." Meanwhile, my financial support remained their dirty little secret. Audrey built her social media presence around being a self-made supermom who created magical childhoods through creativity and sacrifice, not mentioning that Grandma's checks made much of it possible. "We've taught ourselves to live with less so our children can have more." She posted beneath photos of the twins' playroom filled with expensive Montessori toys. "The best things in life aren't things but the memories we create together." The hypocrisy was becoming increasingly difficult to stomach. I was funding a lifestyle that I wasn't allowed to fully participate in. I was supporting grandchildren who barely knew me. And I was enabling my son and daughter-in-law to maintain the fiction that they had built their life through their own efforts. As my 70th birthday approached, I hoped they might make a special effort to include me. Perhaps a dinner with the twins, or even a short weekend visit. Instead, I received a text message from James on the actual day. "Happy birthday, Mom. Sorry we can't celebrate today. Audrey's work event came up last minute. Rain check." That rain check never materialized. Instead, a generic bouquet arrived 3 days later with a card signed by James, Audrey, and scribbles meant to represent the twins' signatures. That evening, scrolling through social media, I saw that on my birthday, while they were supposedly at Audrey's work event, they had actually been at a lakeside resort with friends. Photos showed them lounging by the pool, drinks in hand, without a care in the world, all likely funded by my continued financial support. Something shifted in me that night. A lifetime of putting others first, of silent sacrifice, of accepting scraps of affection in return for substantial support, suddenly felt unsustainable. The hurt crystallized into something harder, a resolve to stop being taken for granted. I didn't act immediately. But as the fall approached, and with it, the annual Thanksgiving gathering at their house, I began to consider what speaking my truth might look like. November arrived with crisp air and falling leaves. As was tradition for the past several years, Thanksgiving would be held at James and Audrey's house. The guest list had grown to include Audrey's entire family, her parents, 2 siblings and their spouses, plus several of Audrey's friends and their partners. I would be the lone representative from James's side of the family. 3 weeks before the holiday, James called to discuss arrangements. "Mom, Audrey's thinking of doing a potluck style this year. She's asking if you could bring your sweet potato casserole dinner rolls and maybe a pie or 2. I had to stop myself from laughing out loud. My contribution amounted to nearly half the meal, hardly a style of any sort. Of course I agreed. "Anything else?" Well, Audrey's also wondering if you could come early to help set up. Her mom can't make it until right before dinner, and there's a lot to do. Again, I agreed, though I noted the different expectations placed on me versus Audrey's mother. One more thing, James added, sounding uncomfortable. The twins have been a bit cranky lately with all the excitement. Audrey thinks it might be best if you don't bring too many gifts this year. Maybe just one small thing for each of them. This was rich, coming from Audrey, whose parents regularly showed up with carloads of presents for ordinary visits. Nevertheless, I told James I understood, even as I mentally adjusted the substantial checks I had written for the twins' Christmas fund. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. Oh, and we're doing a semi-formal thing this year. Audrey's friends from her new job will be there, so everyone's dressing up a bit. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet living room thinking about the upcoming holiday. Every year I told myself things would be different. Every year I ended up feeling like an outsider at a table full of people who had no idea that my financial support was what made their gathering possible. The morning of Thanksgiving arrived cold and bright. I woke early to finish baking carefully, packing the requested dishes along with extra cranberry sauce I knew James loved. I also wrapped 2 small but thoughtful gifts for the twins, handcrafted wooden puzzles from a local artisan. I dressed carefully in a navy blue dress I had splurged on, for the occasion applied light makeup and styled my silver hair. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman who had aged gracefully but whose eyes held a sadness I couldn't quite disguise. When I arrived at James and Audrey's house at 11 a.m., as requested, Audrey answered the door with Emma on her hip. She was already dressed in an elegant burgundy dress that looked brand new, her hair and makeup flawless. "Oh, good, you're here," she said instead of hello, immediately turning away. "The dining room needs to be completely set up and I still have to finish my centerpiece. Can you manage it? Everything's in the sideboard." Without waiting for an answer, she walked toward the kitchen, calling over her shoulder. "James is in the basement getting the extra chairs. The twins have already eaten, so they won't be joining us until dessert." I set down my contributions and began the work of setting the table for 18 people. As I arranged the fine china and crystal glassware I had helped them purchase for their first Thanksgiving as hosts, I noticed new additions to their home: an original painting above the fireplace, a pair of designer lamps flanking the sofa, and what appeared to be newly reupholstered dining chairs. James emerged from the basement, carrying folding chairs. "Mom, you're here," he said, giving me a quick side hug. "Thanks for coming early. We're a bit behind schedule." "Happy Thanksgiving to you too," I said, with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "The house looks beautiful. I see you've made some new purchases." "Yeah, Audrey has a great eye. She found some amazing deals." I doubted that knowing how expensive the painting likely was, but I kept my thoughts to myself. "The twins have gotten so big," I said, changing the subject. "Can I say hello to them?" "They're watching a movie in the playroom with the nanny. Audrey wanted to keep them occupied while we set up. You can see them when she leaves at noon." A nanny on Thanksgiving. Another expense I was indirectly funding. As the morning progressed, I worked steadily. I set the elaborate table, arranged the buffet area, and helped in the kitchen where Audrey allowed it. When the nanny departed, I finally got to spend some time with Emma and Ethan, though Audrey interrupted every few minutes with reminders about their routine. "They really shouldn't have sweets before dinner, Layla," she said sharply when she caught me letting Ethan lick a spoon of whipped cream. "We're very careful about sugar." This from the woman who regularly posted photos of the twins eating ice cream and cookies with their Grammy. By 3 o'clock, guests began to arrive. Audrey's parents were first bringing with them several bottles of expensive champagne and giant gift bags for the twins. Martha, Audrey's mother, air-kissed me briefly before hurrying off to help her daughter with last-minute preparations, leaving me to greet the other arriving guests. Among the newcomers were several couples I hadn't met before. Audrey's colleagues and their partners all dressed impeccably and carrying hostess gifts that were promptly displayed in prominent positions. "And this is James's mother," Layla Audrey would say, as she introduced me without further elaboration. No mention that I was also Emma and Ethan's grandmother, no personal details shared. Just James's mother, as if that was my only identity in the room. Shortly before dinner, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Audrey was in the kitchen with two of her friends thinking they were alone. "God, James's mom is so old-fashioned," Audrey said with a laugh. "Did you see that dress? And she's constantly trying to tell me how to raise the twins, based on how she raised James in the Stone Age." "At least she helps out," one friend replied. "My mother-in-law won't even babysit." "Oh, she'd love to babysit, but I can't trust her," Audrey continued. "She'd probably let them watch TV all day and feed them junk. Anyway, I've learned to manage her. A little flattery goes a long way. And James feels too guilty to set boundaries with her, so I have to be the bad guy." The women laughed, and I stepped back into the dining room, my cheeks burning with humiliation. So this was how Audrey spoke about me when I wasn't present. This was how she viewed my role in their lives. An inconvenience to be managed, a source of free labor and nothing more. As everyone gathered around the table, Audrey's family on one side, her friends on the other, and me at the far end next to a colleague's husband I'd just met, I looked around at the beautiful home my money had helped purchase. I gazed at my grandchildren, whose very existence was partially due to my financial assistance. I observed my son, whose education and career I had supported unconditionally. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel not just hurt but anger. A slow-burning, clarifying anger that had been building for years. Audrey stood at the head of the table, radiant in her expensive dress, champagne flute in hand. "Before we eat, I want to thank everyone for coming to our home to celebrate this special day. James and I have worked so hard to create this beautiful life, and we're grateful to share it with all of you." Our eyes met briefly across the table, and I saw not a flicker of acknowledgement of my contribution to this beautiful life they had supposedly created through their own efforts. It was at that moment I decided today would be different. Today the truth would finally be spoken. The Thanksgiving meal progressed with the polite conversation and forced laughter typical of such gatherings. I ate little, the food tasteless in my mouth, as I observed the dynamics around the table. Audrey held court, sharing stories about the twins' latest milestones and her recent promotion at work. James nodded along occasionally, adding details, but mostly deferring to his wife's narrative. "We're thinking of putting in a pool next summer," Audrey announced to the table. "The twins should learn to swim early, and it would be perfect for entertaining." "That sounds expensive," her father commented. "You two must be doing well." Audrey smiled modestly. "We prioritize what's important. Some people waste money on fancy vacations or designer clothes, but we invest in our home and our children's future." I nearly choked on my water. This from a woman whose closet was filled with luxury brands and who had taken 3 weekend getaways in the past 6 months alone. As the meal wound down and dessert was served, Thomas, Audrey's father, tapped his glass for attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, rising from his seat. "To James and Audrey for hosting this beautiful dinner and for creating such a wonderful life for themselves and our precious grandchildren. Your mother and I couldn't be prouder of how you've built everything through your own hard work and determination." Glasses were raised around the table as murmurs of agreement circulated. Emboldened by the moment, I gently tapped my glass as well. All eyes turned to me with varying degrees of interest and impatience. "I'd also like to say a few words," I began, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. "Family is everything to me, and I'm grateful to be here today with all of you. As James's mother, I've had the privilege of watching him grow into the wonderful man and father he is today." Audrey's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. She likely expected some sentimental rambling from the old woman at the end of the table. James looked vaguely uncomfortable, perhaps sensing something in my tone. Before I could continue, Audrey interrupted. "That's so sweet, Layla, but maybe we should let the young ones talk. Mom's stories can get a bit long, everyone, and the twins will be getting tired soon." A few awkward chuckles circulated around the table. My daughter-in-law had just publicly shushed me like a child, and no one, not even my son, seemed inclined to object. In that moment, something within me that had bent for years finally broke. The careful restraint I had maintained through countless slights and dismissals shattered. I smiled, raised my glass higher, and found my voice. "You're right, Audrey. Why don't you all stay silent for a moment and let this old woman talk just this once?" The unexpected firmness in my tone created an instant hush. Even Audrey seemed taken aback. I've been reflecting today on gratitude and honesty. I continued, my voice clear and steady. And I think it's important that we acknowledge the complete truth about our blessings. I took a deliberate sip of water before continuing. For instance, this beautiful home we're enjoying dinner in, the down payment of $120,000 came from me. The monthly mortgage assistance of $2,000 that's been ongoing for the past 5 years, also from me. A pin-drop silence fell over the room. James's face drained of color. Audrey's frozen smile looked painfully artificial now. The luxury SUV in the driveway that Audrey drives, I covered the $25,000 down payment. The 3 rounds of IVF that blessed us with Emma and Ethan. The $58,000 for those treatments came from my savings. Audrey's parents exchanged shocked glances. Her friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But I wasn't done. The private preschool tuition, the house renovations, the regular emergency expenses that somehow include designer, furniture, and weekend getaways, all subsidized by the monthly support I've provided for years. I turned directly to Audrey's parents. I'm sure you've heard about their financial struggles. What you haven't heard is that I've contributed over $400,000 to support their lifestyle over the past 7 years. All while being treated as an inconvenience, having my parenting advice dismissed as outdated, and being kept at arm's length from my own grandchildren. Audrey's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "Layla, this is completely inappropriate." "Is it?" I asked calmly. "More inappropriate than telling your friends you have to manage me. More inappropriate than claiming you worked hard and sacrificed for everything you have, when the truth is that your mother-in-law has funded most of it." James finally found his voice. "Mom, please. Not now." "When would be a good time, James? When you need another check. You've had no problem accepting my money year after year, but heaven forbid I speak the truth about it in front of company." I turned back to the table, addressing everyone now. I don't share this to embarrass anyone. I share it because I'm tired of the fiction. I've given generously because I love my son and my grandchildren. I've never asked for recognition or gratitude. But I will no longer accept being treated as an afterthought in their lives, while my financial support is treated as an entitlement. I set down my glass and stood up, smoothing my old-fashioned dress. Thank you all for listening. I think it's best if I head home now. Happy Thanksgiving. Without waiting for a response, I gathered my purse and coat and walked calmly toward the front door. Behind me, the dining room had erupted into a chaos of whispers and exclamations. I could hear Audrey's raised voice, and James's attempts to quiet her. As I reached for the doorknob, James caught up to me, his face a mask of shock and anger. "Mom, how could you do this? In front of everyone?" I looked at my son, really looked at him, seeing both the boy I had raised and the man who had allowed his wife to diminish his mother. "I could ask you the same question, James. How could you let this happen for years? How could you take and take while giving me crumbs of affection in return?" "That's not fair," he protested, but the conviction in his voice was weak. "No, it hasn't been fair for a very long time, but that ends today." I opened the door, letting in a blast of cold November air. "I love you, James. I always will. But things need to change." As I walked to my car, I felt simultaneously lighter and heavier. The truth had finally been spoken, but the consequences were yet to be known. Behind me, the beautiful house, with its carefully constructed facade of self-made success, stood silent, its secrets finally exposed to the light. I drove home alone, wondering if I had just destroyed my relationship with my son, or finally created the possibility of an honest one. The silence that followed Thanksgiving was deafening. Days passed without a word from James or Audrey. No texts, no calls, not even an angry voicemail. Just complete radio silence that left me alternating between righteous vindication and crushing doubt. Had I gone too far? The question haunted my sleepless nights. The image of James's stricken face as I left their house replayed in my mind like a painful film loop. Whatever satisfaction I had felt in the moment of truth-telling had faded, leaving behind a hollow ache of uncertainty. After a week of silence, evidence of the fallout began appearing online. Audrey had removed me as a friend on all social media platforms, but mutual acquaintances forwarded me screenshots of her thinly veiled posts about toxic family members and setting boundaries with negative influences. Sometimes the people who should support you the most are actually undermining your success out of jealousy, one post read. Cutting ties with toxic individuals is an act of self-care, not selfishness. The public character assassination stung, but not as much as the complete absence of my son in my life. Christmas was approaching rapidly, and with it the unbearable prospect of not seeing my grandchildren during the holidays. 18 days after Thanksgiving, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Sophia, my oldest friend, standing on my porch with determination written across her face. "Get your coat," she said without preamble. "We're going to lunch, and you're going to tell me everything." Over soup and sandwiches at our favorite local cafe, the whole story poured out of me. Years of financial support mounting disrespect, and the final breaking point at Thanksgiving dinner. When I finished speaking, Sophia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Layla, I've watched you put everyone else first your entire life. You raised James alone, supported him through everything, and then extended that same generosity to his wife. At some point, the giving has to be met with respect, if not gratitude." "But what if I've lost him forever?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "What if I never see Emma and Ethan again?" "Then that's James's choice, and it would be a poor one," Sophia said firmly. "But you can't keep buying your place in their lives at the expense of your dignity. That's not love, it's extortion." Her words, though harsh, rang with truth. I had been trying to purchase love and inclusion with an open checkbook, and it had backfired spectacularly. No amount of money had secured me a meaningful place in my grandchildren's lives or earned me basic respect from my daughter-in-law. The following week, I made an appointment with Dr. Diana Lewis, a therapist Sophia had recommended. In her peaceful office, with its view of snow-covered pines, I began the painful process of examining my own role in the dysfunctional dynamic I had helped create. "You've been enabling their financial irresponsibility out of fear of losing connection with your son," Dr. Lewis observed during our third session. "But paradoxically, your financial support became a substitute for genuine connection, not a path to it." "I just wanted to help them," I said defensively. "Helping is supporting someone through a temporary difficulty or contributing to a specific goal," she replied. "What you've described is ongoing subsidy of an unsustainable lifestyle, one that they've come to expect rather than appreciate." Over the next several sessions, we explored healthier boundaries and what genuine family relationships should look like. I realized that my unquestioning financial support had actually undermined James's independence and growth. By solving his problems with money, I had prevented him from developing his own problem-solving abilities and financial discipline. January arrived cold and bleak, bringing with it my first Christmas without James or my grandchildren. I sent gifts for Emma and Ethan via mail, but received no acknowledgement that they had been received. The pain was acute but strangely clarifying. I began to redirect my energy into areas of my life I had neglected while focusing so intensely on James's family. I joined a book club at the local library, reconnected with former colleagues from my teaching days, and started volunteering at a literacy program for underprivileged children. The hours spent helping young students discover the joy of reading brought back the sense of purpose I had been missing. It was during one of these volunteer sessions in late February that I met William Bill Parker, a retired high school principal, who also volunteered with the program. At 73, with kind eyes and a quick wit, Bill had lost his wife to cancer 5 years earlier. Our shared background in education gave us plenty to talk about, and I soon found myself looking forward to our Tuesday afternoon sessions together. "You remind me of why I love teaching," he told me one day, as we walked to the parking lot after tutoring. "You still have that spark when you connect with a child." For the first time in years, I felt seen for who I was, not what I could provide. It was refreshing and healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. 3 months after Thanksgiving, my phone rang with James's number displayed on the screen. My hand trembled as I answered. "Mom." His voice sounded uncertain, almost childlike. James, it's good to hear from you. A long pause followed. Can we talk in person? We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. When I arrived, James was already there, looking tired and older somehow. He stood awkwardly as I approached, then surprised me with a tight hug. "I've missed you," he whispered, and I felt the wall I had built around my heart begin to crumble. Over the next hour, James laid bare the aftermath of my Thanksgiving revelation. Audrey had been humiliated, her carefully crafted image shattered in front of friends and family. Her parents had been shocked to learn the extent of my financial support, having believed their daughter's narrative of self-made success. "Things haven't been good between us," James admitted. "Your disclosure forced us to have some really uncomfortable conversations about money, honesty, and how we've been treating you." "I'm sorry for the public nature of it," I said, meaning it, "but I'm not sorry for finally speaking the truth." James nodded slowly. "I deserved it. We both did. I've been thinking a lot about how I've let Audrey dictate the terms of your relationship with us, with the twins. It wasn't right." "No, it wasn't. I've also been looking at our finances honestly for the first time in years," he continued. "It's been a wake-up call. We've been living so far beyond our means, Mom. Without your support—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "What happens now?" I asked, afraid to hope for too much. "Audrey and I are in counseling. We're working on a budget, making some hard decisions about our lifestyle. She's not ready to see you yet. But she's agreed that the twins need their grandmother in their lives." It wasn't everything, but it was a start. We agreed that James would bring Emma and Ethan to my house the following weekend for a visit without Audrey present. When Sunday arrived, the sight of my grandchildren climbing out of James's car filled me with indescribable joy. At 4 years old, they were more verbal and independent than when I had last seen them months ago. "Grandma Layla," Emma called, running toward me with open arms. The sound of that title, Grandma Layla, brought tears to my eyes. Apparently, the confusion of too many grandmother names was no longer a concern. The visit wasn't perfect. The twins were somewhat shy at first, and James seemed nervous watching my interactions with his children, as if expecting me to criticize his parenting. But as the afternoon progressed, we all relaxed into a new, more authentic way of being together. Over the following months, a new pattern emerged. James brought the twins to visit me every other weekend. Sometimes he stayed, sometimes he used the opportunity to run errands or have time to himself. Gradually, our relationship began to heal, though it would never be the same. Audrey remained distant, but the aggressive social media campaign against me ceased. Eventually, we reached a delicate truce built on mutual respect, if not warmth. I no longer provided regular financial support, though I did open education accounts for the twins that I contributed to directly. 6 months after our Thanksgiving confrontation, James invited me to dinner at their home. It was the first time I had been back since that fateful night. "We've made some changes," he told me on the phone. "I want you to see." The house looked different when I arrived. Many of the luxury items were gone, replaced by more practical furnishings. The space felt warmer, somehow less like a showroom and more like a home. Audrey greeted me with a stiff but polite hug. "Thank you for coming, Layla." During dinner, James proudly explained that he had received a significant promotion at work. Audrey had scaled back her spending considerably and started a small but growing home organization business that worked with her parenting schedule. "We're living within our means for the first time," James said. "It's actually freeing." After the twins were in bed, Audrey joined James and me in the living room, sitting slightly apart but present nonetheless. "I owe you an apology," she said, the words clearly difficult for her. "I took advantage of your generosity and then kept you at a distance from your grandchildren. It wasn't right." "Thank you for saying that," I replied, recognizing the courage it took. "I'm not promising things will be perfect going forward," she continued, "but I am committed to making sure Emma and Ethan have a relationship with you. They deserve that, and so do you." It wasn't everything, but it was enough to build on. As spring turned to summer, my own life continued to expand in new and unexpected ways. Bill and I began dating, officially taking weekend trips to local museums and concerts. I joined a water aerobics class and reconnected with my love of gardening. The wound of family estrangement had scarred over, leaving me stronger at the broken places. Looking back now, a year after that Thanksgiving confrontation, I understand that my mistake wasn't in giving financial support, it was in allowing that support to become a substitute for honest communication and mutual respect. By funding a lifestyle without requiring accountability or appreciation, I had enabled behaviors that ultimately damaged all of us. The truth spoken clearly and firmly can be painful in the moment, but healing in the long run. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is stand in our worth and require others to see us, really see us, not just for what we can give, but for who we are. My relationship with James, Audrey, and my grandchildren continues to evolve. There are still awkward moments and old wounds that occasionally reopen, but we are building something new on a foundation of truth rather than pretense, and that makes all the difference. I no longer feel like an ATM with a heartbeat. I am Grandma Layla, a woman with value beyond her bank account. I am respected, if not always understood. Most importantly, I am at peace with myself and the boundaries I've established. Sometimes the hardest words to speak are the ones most needed. Sometimes standing up for yourself means others must sit with their discomfort. And sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to participate in a harmful dynamic, even when that refusal comes at great personal cost. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a family situation? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories from my life and the lessons I've learned along the way. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message about setting boundaries and speaking their truth, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening to an old teacher's story, and remember, it's never too late to change the narrative. Until next time, this is Layla signing off with love and gratitude.